All right, thanks so much, and we'll get started with Andrew Twite.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for joining us to talk a little bit about buying used EVs. If we can move over to the next slide, I'll show you a brief outline of what we're going to talk about today. So we'll start off with an overview of electric vehicles. We'll look at some of the reasons to go electric and also the broad categories of EVs. Then we're going to give you a few examples of people who have purchased used EVs recently and kind of talk a little bit about why they chose the cars that they did. And then we'll turn it over to Yuka to show you some of the EVs that are on the market today and to talk a little bit about the things you should be looking for as you move forward with purchasing a used EV. And we'll be sure to leave lots of room for questions at the end too. So type those into Matt and we'll take all questions at the end. All right, so moving forward. So why should you get an EV? First off, they're really great for the environment. So for an XL Energi customer, which is most of the people in the Twin Cities, an electric vehicle actually have just 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions of the average gasoline car. And unlike gas cars, which only get less efficient over time, an EV will have even fewer emissions over time as the underlying electricity generation becomes cleaner. So here we have a graph of the electricity generation in Minnesota. As you can see, back in just 2003, nearly 2/3 of our electricity came from coal. But as we've been retiring coal, as we've been adding renewables like wind and solar, for the first time in 2016, we actually generated more electricity from zero emission sources than from coal in Minnesota, which is a really exciting milestone. So as this underlying transition continues with the electric grid, your EV will actually have fewer and fewer emissions over time. And so another reason to look at getting an EV is because it's really great for your pocketbook, especially a used one. So the graph here shows fuel prices over time. So the gold line is the gas price, average price per gallon, and the blue line is what's called the e-gallon. So that's a measure of how much you would pay for the electricity to drive the same distance as a gallon of gas. And so a couple of things really stand out here on this graph. So first off, that blue line is considerably lower than the gasoline price. Even at today's relatively low gas prices, driving electric is about like paying $1 a gallon for gas. But the other thing that really stands out to me here is the volatility of the gas. So you follow that line over the last 15 years, you've seen a lot of really big price spikes and falls, and the cost of electricity has gone up, but it's gone up a lot more steadily. And so you really reduce your exposure to that price volatility of those big gas spikes like that. And so moving on, another really great reason to get an EV is they're just a better customer experience. So they're silent, they're fast, they handle really well. You never have to go to a gas station to pump gas. You never have to smell gas on your hands. You don't have to smell exhaust. You don't have to schedule oil changes and bring them in for that. So really, I think buying a used EV is really remarkable in that it's really a win-win-win situation, right? So oftentimes doing the environmentally responsible thing is expensive, or it's inconvenient, or in some way it's a sacrifice. But with used EVs, they're cheap to run, great for the environment, and they're really great cars to drive too. So it's a really, really unique opportunity here to go used right now. So once you decided that you're interested in purchasing an electric vehicle, the first thing to do is to determine what type of EV is best fit for you. So there's two main categories here, plug-in hybrids and full battery electrics. So just starting at the bottom there, the full battery electric, like they sound, run only on electricity. So they have big batteries that supply electricity to electric motors, and that does all the propulsion for the car. So there's no gasoline whatsoever in a full battery electric vehicle. And the main benefits of these ones is this is really how you maximize all those cost savings. So the fuel cost savings I mentioned, the maintenance savings. So electric vehicles, in addition to having lower fuel costs, also have really low maintenance costs because they have the electric motor and drivetrain is a lot more efficient mechanically. So there are a lot fewer parts that can break or wear. So between the maintenance and repair cost savings and the fuel costs, the average electric vehicle driver can expect to save about $1,000 per year in fuel and maintenance costs, and also maximizing those environmental benefits too. But the cons for used fully electric vehicles are the limited range. So most of the used EVs you'll see on the market today have about an 80 to 85 mile range, which doesn't always work for everybody. So another option is a plug-in hybrid, which has an electric motor and a battery too, but a little bit smaller one, so that it drives on electric first for the first 10 to 50 miles or so, depending on the model. But then it also has a full gas engine, so that after your battery runs out, you can switch over to the gas and drive another 3 to 500 miles, just like you would any other car. So with this one, you really get the benefit of that unlimited range. You can take long road trips without worrying about where you're going to have to charge, and yet you still have that usually 30 to 40 mile of electric range can cover most people's daily driving needs. So you'll be able to get those fuel savings and environmental benefits when you're on electric, but when you do need to take those long trips, you can know that you can switch over to gas without having to plan your charging route and things like that. So one big question that people often have when they look at buying their first electric vehicle is, how do you charge it, right? So it's often a lot simpler than people think. So for every EV that's sold today will come with a charger that'll plug into just a standard 120 volt outlet. So if you buy an EV today, you can drive it home, plug it in your garage, just like you'd plug in a toaster, and as long as your car is going to be sitting there overnight, should be plenty of time to charge for most people. If you want, you can upgrade to a faster charger, what's called a level 2 charger. These will work off of the 240 volt outlets like you would put in for an electric dryer or an electric range, and that'll be able to charge the car up a lot faster. So this can be handy for some people. So say if you had a plug-in hybrid which had a 30 or 40 mile electric range, and you were going out Saturday morning and you ran some errands and drove around, you could come back, plug your car in, and then it would be charged in a couple hours. So in the afternoon, you could go back out and still have another 30 to 40 miles of electric before you'd switch over to gas. So some people like the faster chargers for that convenience factor, but no matter what, when you buy the car, you'll have a charger that'll work on your standard outlet. It's no sweat to just go home and plug it in and see how that works for you before you decide if you want to upgrade. And there's a really great resource for folks who live in Minnesota, mncharging.org. So you'll go to that website and enter in your electric utility, and it'll send you to the utility's contact page or their electric vehicle page if you have one, where you can learn more about your charging options and also see if your utility has discounts or discounted rates. So a lot of utilities are offering even more discounted electric rates for electric vehicles to charge overnight. So the fuel cost savings we were talking about before, you can even increase those even more. So now we'll look at a couple of examples of Twin Cities residents who have purchased used EVs recently and look at the types of cars, the reasons that they picked the cars that they did. So starting off here, we have the Garbis family, who are a two-car family, so the Nissan Leaf was a really good choice for them. That's a full battery electric. So even though it has that limited 85-mile range, when they still have that other gas car that they could take on longer trips when they needed to, and so they can use the electric vehicle to really maximize their fuel savings. And what especially drove Nick here, who's pictured, is he's a bit of an early adopter when it comes to technology. He really likes to have new technologies, but didn't want to spend too much money. So they were able to get a used Nissan Leaf for about $11,000 and then get all those fuel cost savings on top of that and still have all the technological benefits of having a new electric vehicle, or an electric vehicle, new technology. So second example here, we have Rochelle and Matt and their lovable dog, Monaco. So this is a one-car family, so for them, the Chevy Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid, was really a good fit for them because for most of the days, they live in the city, so most of the days their daily commute is less than that electric range of the hybrid, the 30 or 40 miles. but they also have friends and family in greater Minnesota, so they're making frequent trips out to northern Minnesota, and they know that they can drive electric for most of the time in most of their days, but then still have that option to drive very long distances without having to plan out a charging route. And then finally, we have the Clark family here, who is also a two-car family and also recently purchased a Nissan Leaf. But the driver here was they had young drivers coming up, so they had two teenagers who were learning to drive, and they wanted to upgrade to a newer car that had more modern safety features, and they were able to find a used Nissan Leaf for just about $10,000, which was really the most affordable option they had to give all the features that the Nissan Leaf does. And so that was the right fit for them. And the kind of takeaway here from these three examples is what type of EV is right for you really depends on your driving pattern, depends on what's right for you and your family. And with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Jukka Kukkonen of Plug & Connect, who can show you some of the used EVs that are on the market today and talk about some of the things that you can look for when you are buying a used EV.
All right, thanks, Andrew. That was very good lead to this one. So I'll go more into explaining what's happening in the market right now, how we see the EV market developing in the used side, and also telling you generally about the different models and using four most common makes and models as examples of that. It's really great to see how nicely the used plug-in vehicle market is developing right now. We are starting to have a good number of options for people who are ready to shift to driving electric, but don't want to pay top dollars for the latest and greatest. So there are great deals on used plug-in vehicles for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's the $7,500 federal tax credit for new plug-in vehicles, but it also lowers the price for used ones at the same time. And the second reason is that technology advancements provide new features and longer ranges all the time for plug-in vehicles. So I would somehow, compare PEVs a little bit to the smartphones in this area. If you think about you buy a new iPhone, you pay, now the latest one, like $1,000 for it. 3 years old iPhone costs way less than that, so that's a one way to look at it. Nissan Leaf is a great example of this. When Leaf was launched in 2011, the first model had 73 miles of range, and it cost $32,700. The new Leaf that is coming to market this January will have 150 miles of range. So the range has doubled, and the base price is $30,000. So it's actually a couple thousand cheaper than the 2011 model. So that's a good way to look at that and why we have such a great deals on the market right now. So used plug-in vehicle market in Minnesota provides presently a good number of units, but the latest dynamic in the market is that we have seen the used PV pricing actually rising in recent months. I think this is because there's more demand for people who are realizing this opportunity. I'm sure that we will have more units when original owners trade up or get new leases or whatever, but I would also not recommend waiting and expecting that the prices will fall too much. It seems that the market is picking up right now. So next I will shortly show you four different models and talk about the areas here and just a few general information points. Warranty on the cars, because that's the one thing to think about the used vehicle. All used plug-in vehicles have 8 years and 100,000 miles warranty on the battery and the electric drivetrain parts. So you have a peace of mind in that area. So even if you buy a 2012 or 2013 year model, you're still covered under the battery and electric drivetrain areas. And those really have not had much problems at all, so they have been very reliable in that way. Safety. These cars are all very safe. When introduced, most of these plug-in vehicles have received 5-star crash test ratings. Some of them might have dropped a star or so over the years because rating agencies have changed the test procedures and the cars have not been redesigned to meet those specific tests. But overall, they're very safe in that way. And also most models are very well equipped with Bluetooth connectivity, user apps, rear view cameras, and so forth. So they provide a lot of cool features. All right, so next let's look at the four different models that we have chosen here as examples of the market, one of the most sold in the used market. We have Nissan Leaf as the first one there. According to cars.com, there are 17 used Leafs within 100 miles radius of Twin Cities right now. And the market price for those mostly is between $10,000 and $14,000. And I know Nissan Leafs pretty well because I've leased two of these since 2012 and bought one and sold one. So I've actually played this game already. We have driven over 50,000 miles with our Leafs since 2012, and we like it a lot. So I feel that the Nissan Leaf, for example, is a great car overall. So I always say consider that one as one option when you look into the cars. The range is one question. It has improved over the years in Nissan Leaf. So 2011, 2012 year models had 73 miles of range. 2013 to 2015, the range is 84 miles. And 2016, the range was 84 miles for the S variant, and SV and SL had 107 miles of range. So they increased the battery size there. 2017, all models had 107 miles of range. And now the next year, 2018, that comes out next January, that'll have 150 miles of range. So that just gives you an idea of what the used ones were and where the Nissan Leaf is developing right now with the new ones. Have a couple of basic tips for Nissan Leafs if you're looking into that one. DC fast charging connector has not been standard in all the variations. So if you want more flexibility for your driving, I would recommend get one with the DC fast charging connector. Or if you get one without, it should be a little cheaper in that way. 2011 models didn't have any cold weather equipment. Didn't have heated seats, heated steering wheel, heated or battery heater. So it might not be a best option for Minnesota drivers. We didn't have that originally in our market, but maybe some dealers might have bought some from other markets and brought them here. So just be aware of that. 2012 year models still use the first generation battery chemistry. So these have seen a little bit faster battery degradation, especially in warmer climates. Truthfully, in Minnesota, not that big of a problem, but used prices should reflect this if this has happened. 2013 and newer ones have new battery chemistry in them, and those have not had any bigger issues with battery degradation. So normally my rough recommendation is get a 2013 or newer, and you're safe with it. And also the 2013 and the newer SL and SV models have a heat pump heating system, which is very energy efficient and provides awesome heating performance here in Minnesota winters. They are really, really, really good at that. Just best heater for any car overall. So those are the basic thoughts about Nissan Leaf. So let's move to Chevrolet Volt. The next Chevrolet Volt is a plug-in hybrid. So it's first miles always in a day are electric, and then after that the internal combustion engine kicks in and provides you longer range from there on. According to cars.com, there are 33 used Volts within 100 miles radius of Twin Cities on the market right now, and most are priced between $12,000 and $16,000. There's two generations of Chevy Volts. The first generation is from 2011 to 2015, and the second one started from 2016 onward. So the first generation user interface was not very user-friendly, but the second generation is awesome. And that's not a big deal. I mean, if you start driving it, you learn it within a week. So it's not a big issue in that way. The overall very good reliability. Some of the earlier charging cords had some issues, but other than that, very, very easy. And if you ever want to just replace the charging cords, you can buy a level 1 Clipper Creek unit for less than $250, so it's not a big investment in that way when you look at it. So 2011 and 2012 models had 35 miles of electric range, and after that in the hybrid mode they get 37 miles per gallon. 2013 to 2015 had 38 miles of electric range, and again the same 37 miles per gallon and a hybrid mode. And second generation starting from 2016 with the new fascia, new design, got 53 miles of electric range, so it has a pretty good electric miles available, and 42 miles per gallon in hybrid mode. So second generation is definitely a nice upgrade. So if you are looking into that and want a little bit more range, that's a good option in that way. All right, third model we have here that we are looking at is a BMW i3. According to cars.com, there are 13 used BMW i3s within 100 miles of radius of Twin Cities on the market right now, and most are priced between $17,000 and $21,000. BMW is a very agile car and with really attention-grabbing styling, I would say. It has awesome performance, top models going from 0 to 60 in just under 7 seconds, and it comes with two flavors. There's a pure electric battery version, or the range extender version called Rex, which adds a small 650cc motorcycle engine there that provides more miles for your driving if you need the more flexibility. A BMW i3 seats 4 people. All units have 7.4 kilowatt level 2 charger, but DC fast charging has been optional. So again, be aware of that. If you want to have the more flexibility, make sure that it has the DC fast charging connector for you. Range in these cars, if you look at the 2014 to 2016 models, they had a smaller 22 kilowatt hour battery. So if you have the pure electric model, then it gets 81 mile EPA range. If you get the range extender model, then it gets 72 miles of electric range, and after that it turns into hybrid with that range extender, and total miles about 150 in the range then. 2017 they got a bigger battery, 33 kilowatt hour battery, and in those ones the pure electric range, if you have pure electric model, then it's 140 miles of range. And then if you get the range extender, it's 97 miles of range in total, with the range extender about 180 miles. So that's the BMW i3. And the last model we have here is Ford C-Max Energi, which according to the cars.com, there are 24 used C-Max Energies within 100 miles radius of Twin Cities on the market right now, and most are priced between $13,000 and $18,000. So it's a little bit more expensive. It's kind of comparable to first generation Volt, except that it has a little smaller battery, so it provides only 20 miles of range. But it's interesting that its pricing-wise used, it's a little higher. And that has one reason for that is that because it has smaller battery, it originally got smaller tax credit. So new Ford C-Max Energi has a base price of $28,000, and the smaller battery provided only $4,000 tax credit. So that might be one reason why the used pricing for this one is a little higher in there. It was introduced in the market in 2014, and it hasn't changed too much since then. So pretty much all the year models are very similar to the others. So in this one, I will look at, of course, the available warranty and then how many miles it has in there, how many miles it has been driven. And the question is then where to find EVs. So I normally start with the cars.com. Cars.com website lists all the dealer units that are available in the market. It's pretty good in coverage in that way. You can look at what's the market situation there. In addition to that, you can look at the carsoup.com that has a combination of dealer cars and then also individual announcements there. Whoever is selling a car, they can use a Carsoup for that. Craigslist is mostly used by individuals, but also some of the dealers list their cars there. And then there's a local smaller used car dealer called GS Motors in Hopkins here that is specialized in used electric vehicles. So they have only used electric vehicles available. I think they have like 14 units right now in the lot, so it's always a good place to check. On traditional dealer side, Nissan Leaf, biggest used Nissan Leaf dealers have been Klein Nissan, Wayzata Nissan, and also Eden Prairie Nissan. They also have sold pretty many of those, so they have expertise in that area. In Chevy side, the Rochelle Chevrolet has been selling many, and they are now selling many Bolts and new Bolts, so they are getting many trade-ins there too. So check out their inventory too. They have good number of cars there, and more coming all the time. And when you look at the dealers, I would recommend go to EV Sales Pro website, where we have actually listed all the good sales people at the dealers who know electric vehicles. It's sometimes can be frustrating if you just contact a dealer and the person you talk to doesn't know much about electric vehicles at all, and you would like them to help you in the process. So that's why we have asked a recommendation from Minnesota plug-in vehicle owners, and they have provided the names of good EV salespeople, and we have listed them into evsalespro.com website, so you can find them there.
All right, thanks so much to Andrew and Yuka. We have a few questions that came in through the chat. One I think I can speak to right away, and then I'd also mention for future questions, or even once you get a car and you're kind of curious about a feature you didn't expect or something's going on. One area that's very active is the Minnesota Plug-in Vehicle Owners Facebook page, and if you look for it, the link is right there, and it'll be there when we send out a recording. It's a very active page where a lot of owners are and happy to provide information. We always remind people, the most active supporters and best salespeople for electric cars are the people who already drive them, because they really know how they work and they're so passionate. So you can always find questions there, or at Plug-in Connect/PEV owners, and you can look there. The first question, we had a couple on where to find electric cars, so I think we may have covered that in a slide. And one from John about why some of those sites may identify, and I think he was referring to the Chevy Volt as electric, and does the gas engine charge the battery, or is it directly connected to the wheels? I think that one is it is a gas generator that powers an electric drivetrain, technically, is maybe why they would do it. It's also, who knows how the websites decide to do that.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the cars.com, I wouldn't totally rely on their categorization in that way, so that they are not all categorized right. So that's why if you look at the cars.com website, for example, I would just look based on what make and model you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Then you get better results for it. Then the second part of the question was about Chevy Volt drivetrain, and is the internal combustion engine directly connected to wheels and so forth? Well, that depends on how you look at it. I mean, there are mechanical connections between those two, but it goes through the electric motors there. So do you say that it's directly connected or not? Truthfully, for me, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter for me if the plug-in vehicle has a direct connection to the wheels or not from the internal combustion engine, because my big thing is that when it's in the hybrid mode, I just want to be the most efficient it can ever be. And at that point, it doesn't really matter technically if the internal combustion engine in some situations driving the wheels or not. That's just whatever the technical solution is there. As long as it's the most efficient way to do that, that's the most important part in that.
And we had a question from John as well, asking, you mentioned the low prices. Why are these cars, maybe in particular, depreciating so fast, or why are those prices coming down, or why are they so much less than maybe a new version of the car?
So that's a really good question. One thing to always keep in mind when you look at the used EV prices is that when the person purchased the car new, they got a federal tax credit of up to $7,500. So for example, the Nissan Leaf, like Yuka mentioned, has a base price of around $30,000. But really, after that tax credit, the base price is around $22,000. So if you figure in that and then look at the depreciation these cars have, they haven't really been that much different than gas cars. I think there also is just that the fact that it's a new technology that people aren't necessarily aware of. They don't necessarily know what prices you can get a Nissan Leaf for. I know that's really surprising to a lot of people when we talk to them at Ride and Drives, is that, wow, there are a lot of these used EVs on the market, and they are pretty cheap. So I think part of it is the tax credit, part of it is just that public information aspect.
And we have another question about charging the electric car if you don't have a garage, and is it, if you have an outlet but you have to run a cord, does precipitation become a concern, or snow or rain? How could someone deal with something like that, Yuka?
Well, I would definitely not run an extension cord from 120 outlet to do it. But at the same time, I used to just park my car outside, and what I did for, in my case, is I actually just trench a line there and install a level 2 charging station right by that parking spot. So I was able to do that. The other option is if your parking spot is not too far from your house, you can look at what's the cord length that you would need there. Many of these EVSEs can come with the 25-foot cord, so if it's less than 25 foot, you might be able to just put the charging station on the side of your house and then just take the cord and put it in your car wherever you're parking it. Just make sure that you don't have any sidewalks or anything like that there. You don't want to have people tripping over your cords out there if it's out there. And but it's just fine to charge cars outside. I did it for years. There's no problem with it. I mean, sometimes snowstorms and anything, heavy rains, they can take it. It's not a problem at all.
And we had a question come in about the ranges of the fully battery electric vehicles. I think we talked about that a little bit. You can also find more information on pluginconnect.com, and there's kind of a full list of all the different models there and all the different ranges they may have. The Nissan Leaf, the one we particularly mentioned, they said was usually in the range of about 70 to 80 or possibly a little bit higher. We had someone was asking about that fourth car that was mentioned. That was the Ford C-Max Energi, and so that was the fourth one mentioned. And another question of how are people expecting the Bolt to depreciate over time compared to something like the Volt?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't know that yet. Normally what I recommend for people who are considering buying a new car is to lease it. Instead of buying, lease it, because then you don't have to worry about the resale value of the car. Mm-hmm. That's what I've done with two of our Leafs. I just leased them and drove them, and then I didn't have to worry about it at all. We leased in 2012, and when that lease ended at the end of 2015, we just gave the keys back to the dealer and went and leased another Leaf from the same dealer. Everybody were happy with that. I did buy one used Leaf at that time, but again, for new cars, I normally recommend leasing if that's possible for you.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question from Michael about particularly trying to find a way to charge the EV from their utility using renewable energy, both in kind of the Twin Cities and Greater Minnesota. How could they kind of look for that, Andrew?
Yeah, this is a great segue to that website I mentioned earlier, the mncharging.org. It's a really great resource for people who are looking at electric vehicles. So you'll go to mncharging.org, plug in your electric utility, and then it'll direct you to that electric utility's website. So if the utility has an EV-specific page, it'll send you right there where they'll have more information on it. So all of the for-profit utilities in the state offer renewable-only options, and also many of the co-ops too, through Great River Energy, also offer all renewable options too. So head over to mncharging.org. It's really simple and easy to use, and it'll get you in contact with the utility, who will be able to answer any kind of questions you have regarding charging.
And to add to that one, the Great River Energy program, the Revolt program that they have launched, actually if you get an electric car and you're part of the GRE network there, any of their co-ops, you can get into a Revolt program where they actually provide you renewable energy for charging your car for the life of the car for no extra cost. So it's a great deal for anyone who gets an electric car. Just sign up, you get renewable energy for it, and you don't have to pay any extra for it. So I would definitely recommend that.
And we had someone ask about how long might the batteries last, or can you speak a little bit, maybe Yuka, to the kind of how long, if you're buying it used, is there a concern about how long the battery might last, or has that not been too much of an issue?
It hasn't really been an issue at least so far, and it doesn't look like it's going to be in the future. We have already seen some data on how batteries last, and they seem to last very well. All the manufacturers provide 8 years and 100,000-mile warranty for the battery, so you're safe in that way. So I would not worry too much in that way. As I said, the only thing where I would kind of look at it is steering away from 2011, 2012 Leafs, where the first generation battery chemistry had some issues with the hot weather. After that, not an issue, really.
So those newer models have performed pretty well over time. Yeah. And Tim's also asking, maybe if people are looking at these used models and thinking, oh, I could afford that, I might even be able to afford a little more, and they might be interested in leasing a new car like a Bolt. What kind of rough range have you seen for kind of the cost of that type of lease?
I don't know what the Bolt lease is right now. I would definitely recommend talk with your dealer. But again, go check out the EV Sales Pro first and check out what are the best salespeople to talk to in that way. I was just looking at this in Volt's side of things because one of my friends is looking into potentially getting a new Volt, and there the leasing price was like $319, something like that. At the same time, you can buy a used Volt for $12,000-$13,000, and if you finance that one, your monthly payments might be about $250-$270 segment area. So that gives you an idea of, for example, in Volt, where you have a comparable product earlier and later, what the pricing might be there. Of course, new Volt is a new Volt. It gets longer range, and the used one gets a little less, but at least you have the options there.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question a little bit about how you manage the battery and charging, and there's kind of people kind of have anecdotal thinking of, oh, does it help to keep the battery between that 30% and 80% mark? Does that somehow kind of keep the battery last longer? Is there any kind of strategy to that?
Well, I think lithium-ion batteries in general like the most if they are between that 30 to 80% range in general. Truthfully, when I've driven my cars, I don't baby the batteries at all. I'll just drive. So I haven't seen any ill effects from that in that way. My recommendation there would be definitely that if you leave it standing for longer times, then leave it the state of charge a little lower. So maybe 70%, 60% for lower. If you have a car with a bigger battery and you don't need the range all the time, you can set up these cars so that they will not charge it all the way to 100%. You can charge it to 80%. So then you stay within that area anyways. So those are the things that I would do. If you need to charge it to 100%, I would set the charging timer so that if you use it mostly for commuting and you leave in the morning, you can set up the charging in most of the cars so that you can set the end time for the charging. So then you say, hey, make sure the car is ready at 7 a.m. and that way the charging will end at 7 a.m. and it won't stay too long as 100% full. Yeah, that's an easy way to do it.
And these are all, the charging timers that Yuka's mentioned are all standard on the car, so you don't have to buy something different. You just kind of set it up once and then set it and forget it.
Okay, thanks so much. We don't have any other questions. In the next couple of minutes, people can feel free to type them in. I would say too, thank you so much for joining us. If you're kind of interested in what Fresh Energy does or interested in meeting any of us in person, you can always come to our benefit breakfast event on October 4th. If you go to our website, fresh-energy.org, it'll be right on the top of that main page, and we'll have a featured speaker. Dan will be speaking about electric cars, but we'll also be happy to kind of meet you and answer questions in person. Otherwise, if you just have kind of basic things to follow up on, you can always email Andrew. His email address is right there, and we'll be sure to send out the full presentation out to everyone who registered shortly following the wrap-up. So thanks so much for coming out, and have a good day.